So yesterday was the day to commemorate Zero Discrimination Day. But we got the discussion going today because yesterday we put aside, I guess, the majority of the show to keep with the whole Carnival Tuesday theme. And as I would have mentioned yesterday, we were back to these more, non-cultural and the more hard, serious discussions. And this one is one we would hope that we would not even have to discuss this somewhere in the future, but it's still very much in the mix. Discrimination. It's so unfortunate, and we have to say kudos to all those at the EOC to continue the good work. We bring forward their legal services director, Mr. Haran Ramkaransingh. He's on the Zoom line to discuss the Zero Discrimination Day. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning, JW. Thank you for having me.
Yes, as I would have mentioned, those are the Equal Opportunity Commission, yourself and your team members. Good looking out, and yesterday would have been the day to commemorate. Any particular plans yesterday, what you all did to commemorate yesterday and, of course, well, today and the rest of the week?
Well, we have no specific plans. It's really just part of our programmatic work. We are involved in a lot of activities and working towards the elimination of discrimination, because this is part of our mandate at the Equal Opportunity Commission. Our mandate is not just simply to receive complaints, which is what we do a lot of the time, but we also do, we do a lot of public education. For example, what I'm doing right now is a form of public education. We do a lot of outreach. So that is really what we plan to do. It's nothing very specific, because also at the same time, International Women's Day is coming up, I think, in the next few days as well. So it is a sort of a busy period for us to bring public awareness about the issues that these days are supposed to represent.
That's right. And for those hearing about it, because, you know, every particular day, especially on the show via our producer, she would highlight that particular day and the commemoration and the purpose. What, for those looking on, is the Zero Discrimination Day ultimately about?
Well, Zero Discrimination Day is a United Nations Day. It was originally created by UNAIDS, which is the United Nations agency that is charged with implementing, you know, the programs and actions to deal with the HIV and AIDS virus. So it was originally focused on discrimination and stigma against persons with HIV and AIDS. However, it has grown to beyond that to encompass all areas of discrimination and inequality. For example, this year, the theme of Zero Discrimination Day is laws that empower and laws that restrict. So the theme is really looking at wide issues of law reform to, you know, so that perhaps we can draw attention to what are some of the laws that we have in Trinidad and Tobago and internationally that empower people, that give people rights, that creates a more equal and a more just society. What? And at the same time, we also ought to think about the laws that restrict these and that prevent these from happening, and that encumber persons, and perhaps you know, get on a bandwagon or get on a mission to campaign and ask for reforming or repealing of those laws. So that's a specific theme of Zero Discrimination Day this year. But at the same time, the wider theme will be to focus on issues of inequality and discrimination and social justice and those sorts of things. Well,
I know you have a legal mind, and I want to find out in that regard, when we look at Trinidad and Tobago, do we have equality laws that empower?
Well, the Equal Opportunity Act, for example, is an equality law that empowers. The Constitution, which is the supreme law of the land, guarantees equality of treatment as one of our fundamental rights, equality of treatment by public authority and equality before the law. So that part of our national framework has always included principles of equality and fairness. And then we have, as I said, the Equal Opportunity Commission. It outlaws discrimination in a number of areas, so that, for example, in 4 broad areas, in the areas of employment, education, the provision of goods and services, and the provision of accommodation, it outlaws discrimination where that discrimination is tied to a person's inherent characteristic known as a status. Put very simply, there are 7 status grounds, such as race, ethnicity, religion, marital status, sex, disability, and origin. So to put it in very simple language, the Equal Opportunity Act seeks to outlaw, say, discrimination in your employment based on your race or based on your sex or based on your religion. And it not only outlaws, but it creates a mechanism so that if you have been subjected or anybody has been subjected to that kind of conduct, they can lodge a complaint with us. And as I said, we are mandated to receive it and investigate it and treat with it.
But you know, some of the laws, I just wanted to stick up in there because I know some of the laws still on the books are very much in the realm of I mean, vintage from since colonial times, you know, archaic, really and truly not relevant to the current moment of 2022. When we look at the laws, are they still up to this day? I know, as you would have mentioned, there are provisions to protect and to give folks that particular treatment, but are there still laws on the books that you would deem discriminatory?
Well, there is what we call what we always refer to as the elephant in the room. While the Equal Opportunity Act and many laws protect against discrimination on certain grounds, they explicitly exclude or do not cover discrimination on the grounds of sexual orientation. So, for example, let's just look at the Domestic Violence Act. Persons in same-sex relationships cannot access relief if there's violence in that relationship. You know, the Domestic Violence Act is really just restricted to what you call heterosexual couples and persons in that sort of relationship. Similarly, the Cohabitational Relations Act, persons in a same-sex relationship may not be entitled to benefits on the death of a same-sex partner, the way that you know, what we will say heterosexual couples, even couples who are not married, would be entitled to claim benefits on the death of a partner, but that would not apply to same-sex couples. So that is one area that we say that there is an area for law reform. At the same time, we actually do have quite a bit of laws to protect persons with disabilities, but we don't think it necessarily goes far enough. So it's not that that law is archaic or colonial, but it's just simply not in touch with modern times. For example, if you are a person with a disability, how would you access many of our public buildings? It's just simply not possible for a person who uses a wheelchair, for example, to enter any of our national stadiums or sports complexes, or many of our public buildings. So, and also these are issues of accessibility that need to be looked at. So whereas you might have one law, for example, the laws that deal with sexual orientation, that those are what we could say archaic and hold over from colonial times. We have other laws that are just simply not there. So, and those are areas that you would need to add to our laws. Things like accessibility for persons with disability. One area that we look at is age discrimination. That is not covered by the Equal Opportunity Act. So we've advocated for an amendment to the Equal Opportunity Act to protect discrimination on the grounds of your age.
Yeah, that's a serious one there too, you know, because there is this particular mindset. And again, unfortunately, you know, culture is the hardest thing to change. And sometimes the culture of the land is one that you get a certain age, you should rack up and pack up. Yes. And really and truly, the seniors, many of them still have contributions to make. Yes.
Most countries, well, I won't say most countries, but a lot of countries have actually gone away with the mandatory requirement age. Because the thinking behind it is telling a person at the age of 60 that you must leave the job, you have nothing further to contribute. Really, if you look at it from an organizational perspective, as you correctly said, JW, those persons are at the peak of their career. They have the best in terms of knowledge, skills, and abilities to contribute. So the organization or the employer is denying themselves the benefit of having these persons in their service by telling them, well, at the age of 60, you need to leave and go. So that's from the organizational perspective, but from the individual perspective, people are living longer lives. I believe the Minister of Finance made this comment some time ago that persons living longer life actually, you know, poses, I don't want to use the word a drain, but, you know, it poses more challenges to our national pension systems because, you know, persons are living well into their 80s, you know, whereas in the past this never used to happen. So telling these persons that they have to now be excluded from employment or excluded from public life really doesn't benefit them, and it doesn't benefit the wider society.
I want to find out, before we wrap things up, when we consider the commission, what are you all doing, what have you all done to keep the act relevant, to really burn that fire, to push, you know, obviously the powers that be to understand that, you know what, this is something that as much as it's there on the books, it must be applied. And even to get information out to nationals, to let them know that this is an avenue to protect themselves.
Well, we do a lot of public education. In the past, and when I say the past, I refer to the pre-COVID days, we would actually go into organizations or go into employers or go into places of business and do presentations to them. I guess because of the COVID pandemic, all of our presentations are done online using Zoom, for example, so that any employer, any chamber, any business association, anybody for that matter can, request that I still use the word come in, but I guess I have to change, it's just a force of habit. We have to change that word come in, but they can request that we do training for them, which is free of charge, on what are the provisions of the Act and what they can do to prevent discrimination from taking place. Quite apart from that, we have published guidelines which are available for download on our website. So, for example, an employer can, or anybody, not just an employer, because these guidelines are meant for the general public, can look at we have guidelines on discrimination in employment. We have the guidelines on sexual harassment in employment, which we have said is a form of sex-based discrimination. And we have guidelines for employers on disability, treating with persons with disabilities in their employment. So, as I said, we do a lot of education seminars and public education and training. In terms of the legislation itself, part of our mandate is to review the Act, and I did mention we submitted proposals to the Attorney General for amendment. I mentioned that we had included age discrimination and sexual orientation. So that part of our mandate would be to look at our operations and look at the best practices internationally and see what areas we can amend going forward.
Haran, before we wrap things up, I must ask, because we'll have probably about a minute and a half, so I guess your response could be a brisk one. How do we really sometimes and truly determine when discrimination takes place? Because people use it sometimes as a red flag. From the time they don't get through with something, oh, I've been discriminated against, discrimination, because I'm from Kwaito. When really and truly there are some people who you just don't fit the bill. You just, clearly you're not the right fit for the position at the point in time. How do we determine what's truly genuine, a genuine claim compared to those who might just cry foul?
Well, our mandate would be to investigate complaints. So if you feel you've been discriminated against, you can lodge a complaint with us and we can investigate. So let's just say you applied for a job and you say, well, I feel I didn't get it because I am from so-and-so, this area. We can ask the employer, who are the persons who applied? Did you have an interview panel? Can you give us the score sheets, that sort of thing? And from there, we can look at it and see. Sometimes you might see, well, the person who got the job is more qualified than me, has more experience than me, so then you might be content with that explanation. But for example, sometimes you might actually see, well, this person has less experience than me and less qualifications than me. How did they get that job? And maybe in a situation like that, that merits further inquiry, because there might be genuine situations that you are not aware of. And at the same time, there might be situations that are ingenuine.